Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I thought I would talk a little bit about the novel I wrote and self-published in 2019. It's called Boleyn and His Bloodline and is very much centred around Thomas Boleyn and his relationship with his children, specifically his daughters. I personally feel when historical novelists write about figures from the past, they want to paint them in the best light because these people existed and they're not here to defend themselves. But for me, it's created a division where it puts historical people into a column. Either they were good or they were bad. Thomas Boleyn has been put in both, depending on whether you believe he was led by his brother-in-law, the Duke of Norfolk, or whether you believe he was the driving force behind Anne's elevation. This novel depicts both sides to Thomas. There is no doubt the Duke of Norfolk's best strategy to get close to the king was to place a woman who he could control into the king's bed. That was best demonstrated when his daughter, Mary Howard, the widow of King Henry VIII's illegitimate son Henry Fitzroy, died, and she was begging for financial help. That was the advice given from her brother, the Earl of Surrey, and he must have got that idea from somewhere. She was horrified by this suggestion, and thankfully the king set her up independently with lands from Henry Fitzroy's estate, so she managed to inherit from her husband. And she never married again. She didn't want to be put in that position of an advantageous marriage. She wanted independence, and thankfully that's what she got. But what of Thomas Boleyn? When I researched his early career via the British History Online website, which I'll leave linked below because it's a fantastic source, I accessed the foreign and domestic papers from Henry VIII's reign. The first entry that took my interest was when Thomas Boleyn was a diplomat in France. This would have been leading up to the famous meeting between King Henry and King Francis, the Field of Cloth of Gold, in 1520. Thomas is looking to impress because he wants another role within the court as treasurer. This is because the treasurer can make decisions beneficial to the person holding that office, and a significantly higher position and authority than he has ever held before. He finds out he has missed out on it though because Cardinal Wolsey has essentially sidelined him, and Thomas writes a letter saying he is at a loss as to what he has done to offend the cardinal. He knows he hasn't done anything, but the cardinal is concerned about his own influence on the king. He feels it's waning at this point, and he calls any influences around the king who could speak out against him. Then there is the faction that is formed, led by the Duke of Norfolk, and he's looking for a way to gain influence with the king and stay there. Now, in the book, I suggest it is the Duke, which is engineering a marriage between Mary Boleyn and William Carey. This is because Carey is in the inner circle of the king. He probably still isn't a great match for Mary Boleyn, but she is rumoured to have had a misdemeanour at the French court. Once that hasty marriage is concluded, Mary Boleyn becomes a favourite of Henry VIII. That may have been the plan, but it's unlikely. But she does go on to have a child, most likely with the king, and her name was Catherine Carey. After that, however, things fall apart. Henry loses interest in her, the cardinal is still powerful, and there are many other young women from other families who could lure the king away from their influence. And once again, the Howard Boleyn faction is disbanded from court. The only one left in court, as lady-in-waiting to the Queen, is Anne Boleyn. My novel has Thomas questioning if he wants to have his daughter become a potential mistress. Ultimately, he doesn't. He has too much dignity for his family. It's possible it's why his relationship with Mary is so fractured. When Anne writes to her father and mother, aged 13, from the Belgian court, she sets out what is expected of her from her conduct and her behaviour. It's at the forefront of her mind. It's clear Thomas wants his girls to be respectful and make good marriages. There is also some evidence that he had an elder son, also called Thomas, who died in 1520, possibly at university. George, his younger son, was sent to court to be a page to the king. Anne was sent to Margaret of Austria for a higher education. Then she joined her sister as lady-in-waiting to the French Queen, Claude. So you see this ambition in Thomas that all his children, whether born boy or girl, he would strive to see them do well in life. In the novel, when the Duke voices his schemes to put Thomas's daughter in the king's way, he is not all for it. Anne, on the other hand, might have been. She had been in love with Henry Percy, was desperate to marry him, as it would have been a great marriage for her. Whether the king had any knowledge of it is speculation, but Wolsey definitely did, and it was Wolsey who put a stop to it. Anne was so powerless that this man callously, through sheer political manoeuvrings of her family connections, broke a bond between not only the man she loved, but a man who would have provided for her with a very comfortable life. Her rage was unleashed. Not only would she set out to intimidate the cardinal, but she would play the king by not giving him what he wanted. Did she set out to become queen? Probably not. She set out to punish. My interpretation is that she set out to punish with the only power she had to use. These very powerful men, and the rest is history, as they say. But what of Thomas Boleyn? Was he a victim or a schemer? There was a very nasty, ruthless side to him that we do see in his children as well, particularly Anne and George. At his death, I wondered if he was a man full of regret. Had he controlled Anne's outbursts while she was courting the king? Did he then go on to abandon her after the marriage? In Tudor England, you would move from your father's control to your husband's. I wondered how much control he did have over Anne while she was courting Henry. How much advice did he offer her to achieve her goal? His relationship with Mary Boleyn seems to be fraught from the moment she returns from France. I wonder if because Mary is less willing to obey him. After William Carey dies of the sweating sickness, Mary moved back to Hever Castle with her mother, father, 2 children and her grandmother, who was still alive at the time. That's Thomas Boleyn's mother. I don't write about her in the book because I didn't think it was necessary, but there was another person living at Hever as well. He begrudged having to care for Mary, and she had to go begging to the king for some financial help. Anne too may have helped Mary securing this. Their father, who certainly would have been financially well off at this point, didn't help. But a twist to his personality, and it's the reason I wanted to write this book, is because of his will. He left what he could leave to Mary. Though most likely they were estranged from each other after Anne and George's death, he organised with Cranmer, who he became great friends with, to save as much for Mary as possible. He warned how Cromwell would try to steal land from the estate under the law of without a son, everything reverts back to the king. But Thomas knew what could be kept for Mary, and he made sure Cranmer would see to it that she would inherit. So what do you make of Thomas Boleyn? I would love to hear your thoughts. Boleyn and his bloodline is self-published, so it's not perfect, but this is a passion of mine, and I'm very grateful that today you can share these things without the traditional methods. It's available on Amazon, and I will read you the first 2 scenes from the book. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time in another video. Prologue, September 1530, Hampton Court. Mary observed her sister's growing agitation. She would pace a while, sit, embroider, then be about on her feet again. She was a strange concoction of nerves and fury. "Why do you look at me?" questioned Anne, as she glared at Mary. I worry for you, Mary replied simply. Anne nodded as if distracted once more. This is unbearable. Why allow father to pressure you? Mary pleaded. This is his revenge. Aye, for he knows the cardinal's punishment if I lose Henry's devotion. I must separate him from Henry once and for all. What if he should side with Wolsey? How you would revel in my disgrace, Anne spat. Calm yourself. Jane placed an arm about her sister-in-law, reminding Anne of her presence. Wolsey has condemned himself. The king will side with you. It is not that which concerns me. It is that my existence is the only reason why Henry leaves his wife. Should I not exist, Henry would remain and would perhaps still love her. Tears began to fall, revealing the true distress in her heart. Catherine would remain next to Henry, my Henry. Mary remained silent, unable to reassure. She condemns me to her own misery, Anne continued. I would see myself burned before denying him any happiness. Come along, the king is expecting you, spoke Mary. The turmoil you're exhibiting will displease him. Be of peace. Anne gave a defeated sigh. I've condemned myself, my heart, my soul, my sanity. Henry's own happy countenance changed on seeing Anne and became serious. What is this? He questioned her cold aura and reddened eyes. Have you not heard, sire? Anne queried with a renewed fire in her eyes. Rome has it on good authority that should the Pope excommunicate you, you will return to Catherine. Henry snorted with contempt. If that approach fails, then Rome has been instructed to support an invasion of England by the Spanish in support of Catherine. They have been reassured, however, it will not come to that. I quote, once the concubine is removed from the King of England's company, his better judgment shall return, and he shall be about his wife once more. Henry was white. Who doth advise the Pope? He asked while receiving the copied letter. Cardinal Wolsey. Who else? These are letters between Catherine and Wolsey? Henry said out loud, trying to make sense of it. Aye, printed about the French court. Henry knitted his brow. He thought on the betrayal with bemusement. His slowness to react, however, caused an explosion of temper within Anne. Every injury, every truth, there be a traitor. Wolsey has stalled, debated, questioned and deliberated. He, who has the highest authority on such a subject, finds himself impotent to act. A man who has direct communication to the Pope is unable to summons an answer. Oh, Henry, do not speak in his cause. She silenced him with ease. He was uncomfortable when she cried. He thinks your passion be base, that I, a concubine, a whore, has persuaded you to commit a sin against God. Tell me, sir, what is my sin? I fought for my honour, as the Church commands, and yet it is quick to condemn me for my virtue. If ever there was a contradiction, an injustice of judgment, it is here. For the Holy Cardinal has a woman and has sire children. His human weakness is not condemned, nor is his copulent greed at your expense. The council distrusts him, Parliament despises him, and the public mock us because he inspires them to do so. Anne let out a cry. He has betrayed us all, for all of Europe believe I am nothing to you, that your passions are a dying ember, soon to be left in the grate to go out. Henry rushed to Anne to comfort her, and Mary caught Jane's eye. No, he shall not cause this disquiet within your breast, Henry answered. I'll sign an arrest warrant for Wolsey. He has betrayed me. Merciful prince, secure my belief that I am to be your wife for reasons of love betwixt us. Aye, aye, it is to be, my sweetheart, Henry promised with growing passion. Perhaps Henry Percy should make the arrest, she suggested with a sudden thought. Henry stilled his ardour and thought a moment. As you wish, he slowly agreed. I see your eyes be dry now, mistress, he noted with suspicion. Justice, my lord, vengeance, replied Henry. March 1539, Kent. Some are snared by fate. When our downfall comes, our torturous minds seek the cause, and he was no different, though no amount of recollection could change his reality. It was done, he thought, while retaining an all-consuming dark emotion of regret. Morality can only be born from honest faith, and his faith was lost. The cold air numbed his skin, but internally he felt no temperature, no exhaustion. The suffering was within, convulsing, conflicting and turbulent. He confronted his grief as if afresh. The exertion of justifying his part in their deaths was wearisome, but he had to defend his motivations. How many of us can say we have lived without error of judgment? How many of us consider our actions before they are taken? He pondered to quell the foreboding sense of blame. How would he be judged? Again and again he thought, searching his memory, justifying his conduct. He attempted to divert his conscience away from fault, but that weighty emotion returned to lay heavy within him. His horse was beginning to tire beneath him. He had to reach his home soon. He punished the stallion with extra exertion. The horse, being loyal to its master, strained to obey and kept up the grueling pace. Not long, he spoke, attempting to reassure the beast. We're not far. Nothing could ease his own plight. He cursed himself for not objecting. The horse could stop. If it was so tender and weak, why doesn't it stop? No, nothing could persuade him to release his remorse. Though there were defences, there were reasons for his collusion, but he put them aside. Dark thoughts clouded his senses. Only death would answer his fears. The ride had been tiring and taken longer than he had anticipated, but Thomas Boleyn, Earl of Wiltshire, had arrived home to Hever. As the horse trotted its way into the courtyard, Thomas glanced at his castle with fondness and familiarity. The servants rushed around him, taking his satchel from his horse, aiding him through to the comfortable dwelling behind. The stable boys caught the horse and led it away, but all the commotion seemed distant, as though Thomas no longer participated with the living, as though he was observing from far away. I thought you would send for me, spoke John Robson, his servant. I knew the ride could be done, make no fuss. Thomas dismissed his concern and carried on walking into the great hall, where much had been celebrated and commiserated over the years. Little time had passed when another set of galloping hoofs could be heard thundering across the drawbridge and into the courtyard. John grabbed his master as Thomas attempted to swing around to view the scene behind him, but staggered. Robson hurried to hold his master upright. "Who is that, Robson?" inquired Thomas, unable to focus. "Archbishop Cranmer," he replied calmly, while instinctively sensing an uneasy foreboding. "Ah," yelled Thomas, I told him, I needed no aid." His rage was such to cower anyone, but the intimidation was diminished by his stooped, thinning figure. "If I take you to rest in your chamber, Cranmer can sit with you a while," Robson suggested. I knew he was following me," Thomas said with a defeated tone. Thomas settled in his chamber and removed his furs and jerkin, throwing them onto the embroidered chair. Robson then aided him into bed and brought some wine to sit beside him. Cranmer's heavy tread could be heard below them. Thomas paused to listen to Cranmer as he dismissed his retinue. "Allow him presence now," Thomas ordered. Robson disappeared. Thomas listened to his servant's footsteps upon the tiled floor and heard his voice say, "I think a physician should be summoned, but my master says no." He addressed Cranmer. Without ceremony, Thomas noted. He then remembered with a shudder Robson's loyalty and their own shared trauma. "I will write to Dr. Butts. Thomas will see him," Cranmer reassured the middle-aged servant. He then followed Robson into Thomas's bedchamber. "I told you not to follow me," Thomas reiterated as he saw Cranmer's tall, elegant figure loom through the wide wooden door frame. "I rarely defy you, but I feared." He stopped short of his intended sentence, smoothing his beard with thought. I should die on the roadside? Ha! We do like a public death. He laughed at the macabre humour, the same humour his daughter had indulged in. Us Boleyns, he said with pride. Have you spoken to a physician? I see no need. He will only say I'm dying, and I know this already. Again he smiled at his inappropriate mirth. Thomas, Cranmer, I have important business to discuss with you. A physician can only prolong life, and that is not my wish. I was going to write to you on the subject, but since you are here, my wealth needs to be considered. Hever Castle will revert to the crown, as I have no male heirs, but the contents inside is of great value. I ask when your retinue returns that they strip the house of all items of value, anything, gold and silver plate, chalices, jewellery, and other effects. If left, Cromwell will have it. Who is to be the beneficiary of it? Cranmer queried. One of your siblings? Thomas exhaled and replied with a heaviness in his voice. No. It is to be my one surviving child, Mary. There are a few things of Anne's I want passed to the Lady Elizabeth, and only Mary will have the opportunity to do so without the king's knowledge. Cranmer nodded his agreement. Tapestries, carpets, furniture, it must all go. Nothing of value should be left. Only the bed I die in, and even that can be collected once I am removed. King Henry took too much from me. If I can deny him 1/10 of my wealth, I shall have some satisfaction. I'll write to Mary. We must be sure that she is still living. I could also request that she comes to Hever, asked Cranmer. No, I wish not to see her. You must write, though. There is woodland I promised the king could have. He is not to acquire it. It belongs to Mary. Would this information be better coming from you? I couldn't tolerate her presence, he spat. We've never been friends. Cranmer bowed his head to respect his friend's wishes, but then ventured a reconciliation. Sometimes when we re-evaluate our past, we realise our faults were many, and others not as damaging as we first judged. Cranmer, I dare not venture into exploring my past, he spoke with heat. Why should you leave so much to her then? Inquired Cranmer, in a moment of unguarded irritation. The Lady Elizabeth is declared illegitimate. She legally cannot inherit. For that reason, I must look to another. Thomas, I fear you deceive yourself. What of your sister, Anne Shelton? She? Never. He held firm in his voice of rage. I gift what is left to Mary. But I doubt I can summon any sympathy. She ignites my contempt, not my compassion. Thomas. Cranmer soothed. For the redemption of your soul, find it. Redemption, Thomas smirked. I'm far beyond that.